From the book of Isaiah, we're living in a crumbling world. We really are. Yesterday, Bonnie and I was working on these very slides. We drove down to see the waves crashing, on the coast. We were sitting at a coffee shop, and they seem to have one every quarter of a mile along the coast, And we were sitting there watching the waves, and we sat there for 2 hours, and the woman that worked there, when I closed my Bible, closed my computer, stood up to put it in my bag, she ran to our table, and she said, can I take a picture with you? With her, not me, her. Bonnie, she said, it was very interesting. In English, I am Buddhist. And I said, Bonnie said, good. Yeah, okay. She said, you have peace. I feel. It was very interesting. She felt in her crumbling world that she's trying to figure out. I mean, she's working at a coffee shop. It's very expensive to live on this island. You know what I mean? Life is hard. I don't know, she rides a bus from somewhere. And all those struggles in life, she was watching Bonnie, and she said, you smile all the time. And she said, people that come in our coffee shop don't smile. They just, they come in and get their stuff. Maybe their girlfriend they smile to, but they aren't smiling to the lady making it. What is that about? We're living in a world of hurting people. And so God said, if you live around a crumbling world of hurting people, you've got to learn compassion, and he suggests the pathway. And that's what we're going to go through today. And here's the pathway. Class 13, compassion. Now look what I wrote. What was Jesus' most frequent emotion? When you look at the Gospels, there are 89 chapters in the Gospels. In the 89 chapters of the Gospels, if you do your own study of the life of Christ. Now, remember, every time I read through the Bible, I looked for one thing. When I was reading through the Bible, looking at the names and titles and descriptions of God, I started noticing how Jesus was described. And it said, well, here, I wrote one reference down, Matthew 14:14. Do you remember when all the people were following Jesus? It says he looked at them and he was moved with compassion because they were all following him and they were so hungry that what did he do? He fed them. Remember the feeding of the 5,000? But what caught me was, this is how the Bible calls it, moved with compassion. And I thought, wow, when's the last time I was moved with compassion because I saw someone that needed something? It should be frequent. So, how do we get to this frequent compassion like Christ that God reflects in the Old Testament? Well, we go to Isaiah 54 to 58. So let's open our Bibles, and we're going to be tracking through Isaiah 54 to 58. And my question to you is, how can we most reflect Christ to our lost world? Now, how do you like this? This is a typical scene from Israel. This is an Orthodox, observant Jew. He has his shofar. He's going to blow it. He's wearing his prayer shawl with the fringes, tefillin. That is, you feel like you're at the Western Wall. And that's how they've always been. Now, Isaiah 54. Let's just read. Sing, O barren, you who have not borne, break forth into singing. Verse 1, cry aloud, you have not labored with child. For more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married woman. Pause. Now there's a verse you ought to mark. For the rest of your life, you're going to bump into people that either cannot have children, never get married, and never have a family, or they've done everything, and no matter what they've done, their adoptions don't go through. They never get to have children. Did you know, as a pastor for 40 years, that is a huge, painful thing that people in the church are going through. And so they don't like it when when the whole service, everyone is sitting there with their children, and women are getting up with babies and going out, because they're whimpering and crying, and the church picnic, it's all blankets with families everywhere. They don't even want to come because they feel bad, because they don't, look what it says. They are desolate. Desolate. That's what the Old Testament called that. Because the highest blessing in the Old Testament was for you to have children with your husband and for you to have a son. Because that was everything. Your family name went on, the possession went on, the parents were taken care of by that. So look what God says, which is very interesting. Right in the middle of this, God has compassion. He sees what we're going through. And he says, by the way, more are the children of those that have no children than the children of the married. That doesn't make sense, does it? Oh, it really does. Have you ever heard of, Amy Carmichael, Gladys Allward, all of these unbelievable missionaries that ministered and served and led to Christ orphans and lepers and desolate people? Have you ever met someone in the church that's this older person? They don't have any children. Some of them aren't even married, but they always have their home open. They're the one that always has groups over. They're the one that is always counseling and nurturing. What this is saying is what Paul said. Paul said if you get married and if you have children, you have less time to serve God. Your service to God is raising the children and the marriage. So what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 7, if you don't want anything to bother your missionary work, don't get married. Why? Because the children of the desolate are more than the children of the married. You have time. Marriage, it says, a woman has to think all the time about her husband, and the husband has to think all the time about how to take care of his wife. It's always on your mind. I don't go anywhere without thinking, wait a minute, how will I get Bonnie there? Where will we stay? You're thinking about protecting, providing, that's on your mind. When you're not married, you can fully do ministry. Let's think of the implications of that. A single person like the Apostle Paul, he could get up in a moment, walk to any city, start a discipleship, plant a church. If he got in trouble, go to jail. He didn't even worry about his wife. Do you ever heard of Pilgrim's Progress, John Bunyan? You guys heard of him? You ever heard? It's the best-selling book in the world next to the Bible throughout the last 300 years. It's called Pilgrim's Progress. John Bunyan was in jail for 14 years because of his testimony and being a pastor and writing that book. His wife, every day, brought him a jar of milk and put a cork, that floats in water, a cork in the jar of the bottle, and he took his penknife and he took the cork and he peeled it real thin and he wrote Pilgrim's Progress on a cork thing that his wife, for 14 years, you had to feed the person in jail in that time period in the 1600s in England. They didn't feed you. Your family fed you. It's just a whole different world. Why am I saying that? Those two were completely spending time taking care of each other. Paul, he just spent 100% of his time. So if you meet someone that is childless, unable to have children, all their adoptions don't go through, you can remind them that you can refocus all of that desire to have physical children and refocus it, the Bible says, on having spiritual children. And remember, there's only one thing. Oh, I hope you guys never forget this. There's only one thing you can take with you to heaven, and that's people. Only one thing that you on earth can take with you to heaven, and that's people. People, I mean, Bonnie, here this lady comes over, talks to us, makes me stop my slides so I can take a picture. She wanted a picture of her with Bonnie. It was great. So I took a picture. What do you think Bonnie's doing? She's in her purse. Out comes her Korean God's Simple Plan of Salvation tract. She packs on every trip Arabic tracts, Spanish tracts, Italian tracts, French tracts, Hungarian tracts, Korean tracts, Chinese tracts, gospel presentations. And as soon as we were all done smiling and taking a picture, boom, she's sharing the gospel. There's only one thing you can take with you to heaven: people that you share the gospel with, people that you give a gospel witness to, people that you give a gospel tract to. That is the compassionate heart of living around hurting people.